And when we went through each one, A through I, every one is a mitigator. Every one. And that's why I think the $100,000 bond is only consistent with the bond schedule, a low bond. It's appropriate with the case law, the recent case law, and it's appropriate in this case. She's not a danger to anybody. She's not a flight risk. And I asked the bond be reduced to $100,000. One of the conditions that was made at advisory judge was that the county court judge had asked that her passport be surrendered as a condition of the $500,000 bond. Judge, I have a passport, and I'm prepared to submit that to Madam Clerk here or to the court. And if the court reduces to $100,000, we have no objection to that passport being submitted, and any other conditions the court may feel appropriate, ankle bracelet or anything like that. But she's not going anywhere, Judge.
Has she lived in any other states?
She moved here when, the answer is yes, I think she moved. I forget where it was.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Right.
So since 77 she's been here?
Yeah, almost 28 years.
She moved here with her family in 77?
Correct. She went to high school here. She met John Rush in high school here. And degree here, teaches here for 20 years, and has a whole family here. She's not going anywhere, Judge.
They want to be heard? Thank you. Say.
Judge, it's my understanding that the bond issue was argued somewhat significantly in front of Judge Horrocks at the advisory hearing by one of our assistant state attorneys, and at that point, Mr. Romine appeared on behalf of the defendant, and Judge Horrocks heard argument and chose to set the bond at $500,000 and requiring the surrender of the passport. I'm not aware of anything having changed circumstantially since then, other than I learned since then of Ms. Langtos' concern for her safety and of the defendant attempting to reach out and if you will, research and find out what Mr. Rush was doing or who he was seeing during the period of this breakup, which was concerning. What the state would point out, Judge, is that Ms. Ryan's looking at a 25-year minimum mandatory, which is a great incentive to potentially flee. Under the statute, as it's been argued before you, 943.046, the court can consider the nature and the circumstances of the offense charged and the weight of the evidence against the defendant. And Judge, obviously the weight of the evidence against the defendant is overwhelming as to did she in fact take the life of John Rush. It's really not disputed. The firearm is right there in the residence. She's made multiple admissions to it. Counsel in his pleading today makes admissions to it. So in the case boils down then to an intent type issue, and the statements of the defendant have evolved in such a manner from the beginning of the case that I think it shows the circumstances of her trying to manipulate and mislead the system. She makes reports of a rape, and now she discusses, rather than a rape, that there's an argument and that Mr. Rush leaves, and she's calling him to apologize to him because she's received this text from another potential love interest. So we have two totally different theories of how Mr. Rush gets shot from the defendant herself, and in her statements she indicates in at least several of them that he leaves, she goes to her room, she turns off the lights, and then all of a sudden she hears the door crash open and she thinks it's an unknown intruder and she fires upon him. When the physical evidence is clearly inconsistent with that, she had been on the phone with him within 3 minutes of his death. And Judge, because of those circumstances, we think that 500 is more than reasonable. At the initial hearing, we argued for the court not to set the bond. So we believe, based on the evidence the court has before it today, that the weight of the evidence is in fact strong against the defendant, that she's looking at a significant sanction, that being minimum of 25 to life based on 1020 life application to the charge, and that she's made so many inconsistent statements about what took place that they in fact are indications of her guilt.
So essentially what I think I hear you saying, the ground that you essentially travel on is the strength of the evidence against her. Because it seems to me otherwise, she's got 20 whatever number of years here since 77 in this county with no prior criminal history. For at least until now, she's not been accused of not being anything but an upstanding member of our society. Her family is here. So she's got substantive and significant ties. She's someone who's clearly entitled to a bond. She's also entitled to a reasonable bond. The only thing that I've heard that makes her a possible danger to the community is the speculation of someone who has given me no basis to believe that she actually is gonna be the subject or possible subject of being attacked by the defendant in this case.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm arguing the nature and circumstances of this offense, what we believe is obvious deception. That, I think, goes into play as to what is her reasonable danger to the community if she's deceptive from the beginning to throughout the investigation, and the weight of the evidence against her.
But how? Connect me to the reasonable danger to the community. How that deception is evidence of the possible reasonable danger to the community. I just haven't seen the connection in what it is that I'm hearing at this time.
Well, Judge, I think that the court's receiving a presentation of her upstanding reputation, her connections to the community and everything else, but if in fact she, the same individual who apparently has this upstanding livelihood in the community, immediately takes the line to the police during the investigation of an individual who she loves, that gives this court, or should give this court, concerns as to whether or not she will in fact appear. We have indications that she restricted her phone to cloak it, if you will, and called the new interest of her estranged husband while she was actually in the hospital due to an accident. The only reason for that would be to be checking up on her. We've heard from her stepdaughter that her own stepdaughter feels fearful of her because she goes around and makes contacts or attempts to make contacts with her through other individuals, showing an indication that she's, again, deceptive and I would suggest manipulative, Judge, and I think that that should go into the court's consideration as to flight risk as well as a possible danger to the community.
Thank you. You get the last word, Mr. Fiedelman.
Judge, as I said, I think that all the criteria set out in 903.462 are all mitigators. And with the low-end suggestion of 100,000, the recent case law, the Reese case, where the court said at 100,000, the facts that are more egregious than this, I think every factor A through I is a mitigator. And the fact for the state to suggest that she's somehow deceptive when she's had an outstanding 20-year teacher career, that she's been in Pinellas County for almost 30 years, 20 years, that her whole family's here, that she's surrendering her passport, that she's got a family supporting and putting up their homes. She's not going anywhere. And that she's never even been arrested for anything. I think 100,000 is a very, very ample bond to secure her appearance at court, Judge.
I think there should be a modification of the bond. I think her time in our community, the fact that she is entitled to a presumption of innocence, I do understand that the weight of the evidence is pretty significant against her at this point in time and is a relevant consideration. But at the very same time, she has significant ties. I do not believe she is in fact a flight risk, and I would modify the bond. I'm not inclined to modify the bond as requested. It's not going to be 100,000, but I will cut it in half to 250,000 in order that she's on an ankle monitor. She is not to leave the county, and the defendant is also not to have any contact whatsoever with any of the victim's daughter or his, I'm not sure exactly how to term it. She didn't really sort of qualify herself as an actual paramour, but at some point in the past was a friend. So no contact with either of those parties. Did I miss anything?
No, Judge, we have a passport to surrender to it.
Passport is also surrendered.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.